Imagine for a moment that the next royal scandal doesn't erupt from a bombshell interview or a tell-all book. Imagine it begins quietly, almost innocently, with a project that seems harmless on the surface, a documentary about cookies. Yes, cookies. Girl Scout cookies, to be precise. It sounds whimsical, almost endearing. But what if behind this seemingly sweet story lies a plan that could shake the royal family to its core? What if the Duke and Duchess of Sussex, long accused of pushing boundaries, have another strategy, one that Prince William reportedly sees as crossing a line he can no longer ignore? But before we continue, please subscribe and turn on the notification bell for updates. It's difficult to overstate the gravity of this story because it's not just about cookies. It's about perception, legacy, and the delicate balance between family loyalty and public responsibility. The announcement of Cookie Queens, set to premiere in 2026, was initially met with confusion. The press described it as a coming-of-age story about the joys, pressures, and pain points woven into one of America's most cherished rituals, Girl Scout cookie season. Innocent enough on paper. But for those who watch the royal family closely, and especially for insiders, the words executive producers attached to Harry and Meghan immediately set off alarms. Think about it. Prince Harry, once the golden boy of the monarchy, now allegedly aligning himself with a project that could, indirectly, reveal aspects of the royal family's private life. Meghan Markle, already a media force to be reckoned with, adding her influence to the mix. Together, they are presenting something that, on the surface, appears harmless, a celebration of tradition and childhood, but underneath could carry subtext capable of undermining centuries of royal protocol. And according to reports circulating in royal circles, this is exactly what Prince William is concerned about. You might be asking yourself, why would William care about a cookie documentary? The answer lies in the pattern. Every project Harry and Meghan have embarked on since stepping back from royal duties has had layers. What started as philanthropic initiatives quickly morphed into media ventures that some argue capitalize on their royal connections. From Netflix documentaries to interviews that allegedly revealed palace secrets, each step seemed carefully calculated. And now, with Cookie Queens, the question haunting palace insiders is simple. Where does it end? Is it about cookies, or is it about influence and profit? The timing couldn't be more critical. King Charles is still solidifying his reign, and the eyes of the world are on Prince William as the heir apparent. Every move Harry and Meghan make is not only scrutinized by the media, but also interpreted by the public as a reflection on the monarchy itself. In other words, what Harry and Meghan do isn't happening in a vacuum. Every project, every statement, every subtle implication ripples through the royal institution. And, according to some insiders, William has had enough of the ripple effects turning into waves. Now, imagine the scene inside the palace when the announcement came through. The press release on deadline was innocuous, almost cheerful, but behind closed doors, the reactions reportedly ranged from disbelief to quiet anger. What stood out the most to Prince William was not the subject of the documentary. It was the potential implications of Harry's and Meghan's involvement. As a royal tasked with protecting the institution, William reportedly saw the project as more than a simple film. To him, it was a continuation of a pattern he has watched unfold for years, a pattern that threatens not only the perception of the monarchy, but also the family dynamics that hold it together. And here's the twist. Prince Harry, who once seemed eager to maintain a sense of privacy and distance from royal drama, now appears willing to place himself front and center in a public project with global visibility. Executive producing a documentary, especially one designed to appeal to a wide audience, offers the opportunity to shape narratives subtly, to influence perception, and perhaps to share insight that wasn't intended for public consumption. Whether intentional or not, the impact is significant. And Meghan, ever the strategist, adds another layer. With her understanding of media influence, her involvement raises questions about intent, ambition, and long-term strategy. It is impossible to ignore the emotional component. Prince William and Prince Harry were once close. Their bond forged through shared childhood experiences, pressures of royal duty, and the tragic loss of their mother. That bond has frayed over the years, particularly since Harry's decision to step back from royal duties. Every public action taken by Harry and Meghan has been interpreted through the lens of brotherly tension. And according to sources, William has watched with growing concern as projects designed to entertain, inspire, or educate are simultaneously creating subtle narratives about the royal family. Consider this. Every mention of royal pressure, every reference to expectation, even in a seemingly unrelated documentary, can be interpreted as commentary on the monarchy. To those inside the institution, this is more than media, it is influence. It is shaping public opinion in ways that could have lasting consequences. And for Prince William, whose role is to safeguard not just the reputation but the structure of the monarchy, the implications are deeply personal. But let's not overlook the human element. Beyond titles, traditions, and public perception, this is a family conflict. Brothers, cousins, parents, and children are all entangled in decisions that the public will consume as entertainment, but that the family experiences as emotional reality. The notion that a cookie documentary, a subject so seemingly trivial, could be perceived as a strategic move against the family highlights just how tense these dynamics have become. It also raises a question every royal observer is now asking. What lines have been crossed, and what lines are still untouchable? And here is the heart of the matter, the concept of titles. Royal titles carry weight, not just socially, but institutionally. They signify responsibilities, expectations, and a level of accountability. When titles are mentioned in the context of potential stripping or alteration, the stakes are elevated. For Prince William, this is not about punishing his brother. It is about maintaining the credibility and integrity of the monarchy itself. The rumors circulating about potential consequences of Harry's and Meghan's project are not mere gossip. They reflect concerns about precedent, about the message sent to the public, and about the internal cohesion of the family. The introduction of cookie queens also highlights the evolving nature of media and influence. In previous generations, a royal scandal might have been confined to whispers, private letters, or newspapers. Today, projects with global reach, streaming platforms, and social media amplification can turn a narrative into a worldwide conversation overnight. Harry and Meghan understand this power intimately. They have used it before. Now, the question is whether the monarchy, and Prince William specifically, can respond effectively without escalating the conflict publicly. But what makes this story especially compelling, and especially tense, is the contrast between perception and reality. On the surface, a documentary about cookies evokes warmth, nostalgia, and tradition. Beneath the surface, however, palace insiders reportedly see ambition, strategy, and perhaps even subtle critique. And this duality, the sweetness of cookies juxtaposed with the bitterness of family conflict, is what makes the unfolding events so riveting. It's a reminder that in the royal world, nothing is ever just what it seems. As we prepare to explore the full story, it is important to recognize the stakes. The royal family is not simply a subject of media fascination. It is an institution, a legacy, and a family intertwined with centuries of expectation. Every decision made by Harry and Meghan in their public projects reverberates far beyond personal ambition. And for Prince William, each ripple is a reminder of the delicate balance he must maintain between protecting the family, preserving public trust, and managing his own emotions. By the end of this video, you will have a clearer understanding of why a project that appears to be about cookies could trigger discussions about titles, influence, and loyalty. You will see why insiders believe that what comes next may be decisive for the Sussexes, for the monarchy, and for the relationship between two brothers whose lives continue to fascinate the world. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. Imagine hearing about a new royal project and thinking, how sweet. Cookies. That's exactly what happened when Deadline announced Cookie Queens, a documentary executive produced by Prince Harry and Meghan Markle, set to premiere in 2026. On the surface, it's a nostalgic celebration of Girl Scout cookie season, childhood innocence, community engagement, and fun traditions. But for palace insiders, it raised immediate red flags. Why would a project centered on cookies, something so seemingly benign, trigger whispers of concern and even outrage within royal circles? The answer lies in context. Harry and Meghan's media ventures have never been purely about entertainment. Each project has layered meanings, strategic undertones, and, according to some sources, subtle references to the royal institution. Think of Netflix's Harry and Meghan docuseries or Meghan's prior television appearances, each carefully curated and marketed. Cookie Queens, however, presented a new challenge. By framing their documentary around a culturally iconic ritual, the couple could embed narratives and emotional cues that might reflect on their own experiences with public scrutiny, pressure, or institutional expectation. And from a royal perspective, even the hint of commentary is enough to raise alarms. Deadline's press release was cheerful and concise. It described the project as a coming-of-age story about the joys, pressures, and pain points woven into one of America's most cherished rituals, Girl Scout cookie season. The wording may sound innocent to the general public, but insiders read between the lines. Phrases like pressures and pain points are particularly sensitive in a royal context. After all, Harry and Meghan's departure from official duties was partly justified by claims of stress, scrutiny, and institutional constraints. A documentary emphasizing similar themes, however indirectly, could be perceived as validating those claims, shaping public sentiment, or even influencing cultural perceptions of the monarchy. What is particularly striking about this project is the involvement of Prince Harry as an executive producer. Unlike Meghan, who has established herself in media and entertainment circles, Harry carries a dual identity: former royal, now media personality. This duality provides unique authority and insider credibility. For those watching the monarchy, this is not a neutral choice. It positions Harry as a storyteller with access to the world he once inhabited intimately, giving weight to even subtle implications. And the stakes are higher because, according to palace sources, William reportedly saw this as a recurring pattern. Every venture Harry has launched, intentionally or not, has been accompanied by scrutiny, speculation, and, at times, quiet outrage within the institution. To understand why the project raised concern, it helps to step into the palace mindset. For centuries, the monarchy has relied on discretion, careful messaging, and the separation of public and private life. Every statement, interview, or creative venture is analyzed not just for content, but for intent and implication. Within that framework, a seemingly innocuous documentary about cookies is no longer just a documentary. It's potentially a vehicle for influence. Every narrative choice, every emotional beat, every thematic emphasis can be interpreted as commentary on royal experience. In other words, nothing is ever truly neutral. Another layer of concern stems from timing. With King Charles stabilizing his reign and Prince William preparing for the future, the Sussexes' visibility on the global stage remains high. Their media influence, combined with a project designed for mass consumption, means that even small messages can have large consequences. The palace reportedly viewed this as more than a personal project. It was a strategic maneuver in a complex media landscape. From William's perspective, this is where caution intersects with responsibility. He has a duty to the institution, to his future role as king, and to the public's trust in the monarchy. And when the potential for misinterpretation, or worse, deliberate implication, arises, alarm bells ring. But let's step back and examine the documentary itself. Cookie Queens is designed as a coming-of-age narrative, exploring the pressures and joys of Girl Scout cookie season. This concept is inherently relatable and appeals to broad audiences. It touches on themes of childhood achievement, teamwork, entrepreneurship, and resilience. On its surface, there is no controversy. Yet, subtle choices, phrasing, narrative framing, and emphasis on overcoming obstacles can mirror Harry and Meghan's own experiences, consciously or subconsciously drawing parallels between their lives and the story being told. This is what insiders reportedly worried about, an innocuous project that carries layers of implied meaning. Consider the broader pattern. From interviews to documentaries, Harry and Meghan's media engagements have often walked the line between entertainment and personal revelation. Each project offers glimpses into the couple's worldviews, relationships, and grievances. Cookie Queens, by centering on pressure and pain points, could be seen as the next chapter in this trajectory. And while public audiences may view it as charming or inspiring, Palace insiders are acutely aware that narrative framing can influence perception in powerful ways. Every choice, what is highlighted, what is left unsaid, what tone is emphasized, carries weight. The emotional stakes are also significant. William and Harry share a complicated relationship shaped by loss, responsibility, and evolving public roles. Their bond has frayed over the years, exacerbated by media scrutiny, personal decisions, and differing approaches to royal life. From William's perspective, every public move by Harry is not only a personal choice, but a potential reflection on the monarchy and on him as heir. This project, therefore, is not evaluated in isolation. It is seen as part of a continuum. William reportedly viewed it as another instance where Harry's media engagement intersects with familial and institutional consequence. Public perception amplifies these stakes. In today's media environment, narratives spread quickly, and interpretations often outpace facts. A documentary about cookies may seem trivial, but when produced by individuals with royal connections, it becomes part of a larger story. Audiences, particularly those familiar with previous controversies, may draw connections between the documentary's themes and the Sussexes' personal experiences. Even indirect references to stress, pressure, or expectation can be read as commentary on the royal family. For William and other palace members, these potential interpretations are concerning. They may not be overt, but the influence is subtle and pervasive. Adding to the tension is the question of intent. Are Harry and Meghan consciously embedding personal narratives in the documentary, or is it an inadvertent reflection of their experiences? Regardless, perception matters. Public interpretation of media is rarely neutral. And in this context, perception has consequences. It can influence public opinion, shape cultural narratives, and even affect the internal dynamics of the royal family. From William's perspective, what may seem like a benign media project to outsiders carries the potential for reputational risk and personal frustration. Perhaps most importantly, the announcement of Cookie Queens reportedly triggered discussions about consequences. While no formal decisions had been made at the time, the palace was said to be evaluating responses, considering not only messaging strategies, but also broader implications for titles, roles, and visibility. This is where the story takes a more serious turn. The project is no longer just a documentary. It is a potential catalyst for discussions about authority, responsibility, and the future of the monarchy. And for William, the recurring theme of media ventures tied to personal narratives was reaching a tipping point. Even the involvement of Meghan adds layers of complexity. Her expertise in media strategy, storytelling, and branding is well documented. With her influence, Cookie Queens is not merely a creative project. It is a carefully constructed venture with the potential to reach millions and shape perception. From a palace perspective, this intensifies the stakes. When media influence intersects with familial relationships and institutional integrity, the lines between entertainment and consequence blur. And this blurring is precisely what reportedly unsettled Prince William and other insiders. The implications extend beyond the family. Public perception of the monarchy is delicate. Every action by Harry and Meghan contributes to ongoing narratives about the royal institution, including claims of dysfunction, modernization, or internal tension. Even a seemingly unrelated documentary can feed into these narratives, intentionally or not. And in the age of social media amplification, subtle messages are magnified, reaching audiences worldwide within hours of release. For the monarchy, this is not simply about optics. It is about maintaining credibility, trust, and continuity. Finally, there is the question of precedent. If Cookie Queens is allowed to proceed without scrutiny, what message does that send to future generations, both within the royal family and in the public eye? Every creative project by high-profile individuals connected to the monarchy is inherently symbolic. Allowing one to unfold unchecked could embolden future ventures with similar undertones, challenging traditional norms and expectations. From William's perspective, the stakes are long-term, extending beyond a single documentary or even a single generation. And yet, despite all this concern, the public reaction to the announcement was largely neutral, even positive. Few questioned the deeper implications, and most coverage focused on the heartwarming aspects of the documentary. This disconnect between public perception and internal concern is exactly what palace insiders reportedly found frustrating. To them, the stakes were high, and the consequences could be significant. A seemingly innocent project, if misinterpreted or strategically leveraged, had the potential to influence both familial dynamics and public opinion in ways that were difficult to control. As we move forward, the tension becomes clear. Cookie Queens is not merely a documentary about cookies. It is a symbolic touchpoint in a complex web of family, media, and institutional dynamics. It raises questions about intent, perception, and consequence. And for Prince William, it represents yet another challenge in a long series of decisions where personal loyalty, public responsibility, and family legacy intersect. When the announcement of Cookie Queens landed, one detail immediately drew the sharpest attention: Prince Harry's involvement as an executive producer. At first glance, the title might seem innocuous, almost ceremonial. But anyone familiar with Harry's dual identity, as both a former senior royal and a public media figure, knows it carries enormous implications. It is the difference between a neutral observer and someone with insider authority, credibility, and influence. And according to palace insiders, it is precisely this role that escalated concern. To understand why Harry's involvement changes everything, you need to step back and consider his unique position. Unlike Meghan, who comes from the world of media and entertainment, Harry was born into the monarchy. He grew up immersed in royal life, understanding its nuances, rules, and expectations. That experience grants him an insider perspective few could claim. When he engages with a public project, it is not in the same vacuum as a celebrity production. Every word, every frame, carries implied insight into a world the public cannot access. Even if the documentary never explicitly references the royal family, Harry's presence lends an aura of authority and authenticity that amplifies every potential interpretation. It is important to note that Harry's media ventures have never been simple exercises in entertainment. They are strategic in nature, deliberately curated to balance personal storytelling with public impact. Whether consciously or unconsciously, Harry has shown an understanding of how narratives shape perception. By executive producing Cookie Queens, he assumes control over not only the content, but also the messaging, the emotional tone, and the public framing. From the perspective of Prince William and other palace members, this is not merely a creative role. It is a position that wields influence over public sentiment in ways that can be subtle yet profound. Moreover, Harry's involvement contrasts sharply with his stated intentions after stepping back from royal duties. Publicly, he has emphasized privacy, distance from palace politics, and the desire to live a more independent life. Yet, by engaging deeply in a global media project, he positions himself at the center of public discourse once again. This apparent contradiction is not lost on royal observers. From a strategic standpoint, Harry is leveraging his insider status in a way that could, intentionally or not, reflect on the monarchy. And that is precisely the tension William reportedly recognized. Consider the symbolic weight of the term executive producer. It conveys not only creative oversight but also authority and decision-making power. It signals that Harry is not just lending his name. He is shaping the narrative. Every choice, from the way participants are filmed to which themes are emphasized, carries potential for subtle messaging. For palace insiders, this is critical. Media projects by royals are never neutral. They are inherently interpretive. By stepping into this role, Harry takes on influence that is both unavoidable and far-reaching. But it's not just authority that causes concern, it's credibility. Harry's status as a former senior royal gives him a level of credibility that few others could claim. Audiences recognize his access and his history within the institution. That recognition amplifies the impact of any project he touches. Even a documentary ostensibly about cookies can suddenly be interpreted as a commentary on pressure, expectation, and familial dynamics. And for William, who bears the responsibility of preserving the monarchy's reputation and stability, the potential for unintended or deliberate connotations is deeply troubling. The emotional dimension cannot be ignored. William and Harry's relationship has been tested repeatedly over the past decade. Their shared history, childhood experiences, the tragic loss of their mother, and years of navigating public scrutiny creates a complex emotional backdrop. From William's perspective, every public endeavor by Harry carries weight, not only institutionally but personally. Cookie Queens, in this context, is more than a documentary. It is a reminder that Harry continues to operate in the public sphere with a level of autonomy that William may perceive as both challenging and destabilizing. Public perception further magnifies these stakes. In today's media landscape, subtle narratives travel quickly and are often interpreted through the lens of existing controversies. Audiences familiar with Harry and Meghan's previous media projects may read deeper meaning into even the most benign moments of Cookie Queens. Themes of pressure, challenge, and perseverance may be interpreted as analogies for Harry and Meghan's experiences within the royal family. From William's perspective, this creates a ripple effect that extends far beyond the documentary itself, influencing public opinion, shaping cultural narratives, and potentially complicating the monarchy's image. Harry's personal journey adds another layer of complexity. He is no longer a traditional royal. He is a public figure with global reach, personal ambitions, and a desire to define his own legacy. Executive producing Cookie Queens allows him to merge these identities, royal insider and media personality, into a single influential position. The tension arises because the monarchy is accustomed to discrete roles, where duties, public appearances, and messaging are carefully managed. Harry's dual role challenges that model, creating both opportunity and conflict. Another factor is control. By taking on executive producer responsibilities, Harry assumes decision-making power over the project's content, tone, and direction. He can influence which narratives are highlighted and which remain in the background. From a palace perspective, this level of control is concerning, especially given the potential for public interpretation to connect themes in the documentary to personal experiences or the royal institution. Even if no direct references are made, audiences may perceive parallels, intentional or not, and that perception alone carries consequences. The strategic implications are also significant. Harry and Meghan have demonstrated an acute awareness of media influence. Each previous project has been accompanied by calculated marketing, social media promotion, and media engagement strategies. Cookie Queens fits this pattern, combining cultural relevance, mass appeal, and personal branding. For William and the palace, the concern is not simply about content. It is about influence, reach, and timing. The project's design allows it to capture attention, spark discussion, and potentially shift narratives in ways that are difficult to control once released. Furthermore, Harry's role underscores a broader question about intent. Are these choices deliberate, aiming to influence public perception and subtly shape narratives about the monarchy? Or are they simply the natural outcome of a couple navigating media opportunities? From an external perspective, the answer is unclear. But internally, palace insiders reportedly see patterns, repeated media engagement that touches on themes of pressure, expectation, and institutional critique. Harry's executive producer role places him at the center of that pattern, raising questions about motives, messaging, and potential consequences. There is also a historical element. The monarchy has always had to manage perception carefully, balancing transparency with discretion. Every public action by a royal carries symbolic weight. Harry's involvement in a high-profile media project represents a departure from traditional norms, not in terms of creativity, but in terms of potential implications for perception, loyalty, and institutional authority. For William, charged with safeguarding the monarchy's integrity, this represents both a challenge and a potential crisis point. Audience engagement is another layer to consider. A project produced by Harry will inevitably attract global attention. Media outlets, social platforms, and commentators will dissect every scene, phrase, and implication. Themes of challenge, growth, and pressure, central to Cookie Queens, may be interpreted in ways that reflect on Harry and Meghan's experiences with the royal family. In this sense, Harry's executive producer role amplifies impact beyond the documentary itself, influencing conversation, shaping narrative, and potentially affecting the monarchy's public image. Finally, the personal stakes cannot be overlooked. William is not simply a steward of the monarchy, he is Harry's brother. Each project, each decision, carries emotional weight. Reports suggest that William perceives Harry's media choices as repeated tests of familial boundaries, challenges to protocol, tradition, and personal loyalty. Cookie Queens, innocuous as it might appear to the public, is therefore evaluated through both personal and institutional lenses. And according to sources, it is this dual lens, emotional and operational, that makes Harry's role so consequential. The takeaway is clear. Harry's involvement transforms Cookie Queens from a simple documentary into a project with layered implications. It is not just a story about cookies. It is a narrative with the potential to influence perception, highlight themes connected to personal and familial experience, and challenge traditional notions of discretion and authority within the royal institution. And for William, this is the point at which concern reportedly shifts toward action. But what William allegedly did in response to Harry's role, and how it may affect titles, visibility, and the future of the Sussexes, is a story that goes even deeper. What came next would not only challenge family dynamics, but also set the stage for decisions with potentially lasting consequences, and no one saw it coming. To understand why Cookie Queens sparked internal alarm, it is essential to look beyond the documentary itself and examine the broader pattern. Prince William, as heir to the throne and guardian of the monarchy's legacy, reportedly views Harry's media ventures not as isolated incidents, but as part of a repeating cycle. A pattern that threatens to erode both family unity and institutional stability. The concern is not simply that Harry is producing content. It's that the projects follow a recognizable trajectory, one that William has watched unfold for years, with increasing unease. The pattern begins with visibility. From the moment Harry and Meghan married, their lives were public property, scrutinized to the smallest detail. But while other royals navigated the pressures of public attention with discretion, the Sussexes often engaged the media proactively. Early interviews, philanthropic projects, and selective storytelling set a precedent. Every initiative, however noble on the surface, was accompanied by an element of narrative shaping. For William, each new project reinforced a sense that his brother's approach to public engagement was fundamentally different from traditional royal expectations. Next comes the emotional undertone. Almost every project the Sussexes have launched contains themes of stress, scrutiny, or institutional pressure. Netflix documentaries, interviews, and public statements repeatedly touch on these elements, portraying a personal journey entwined with public life. William reportedly noticed that these recurring themes do more than entertain. They influence perception. Audiences begin to associate Harry and Meghan not just with celebrity or philanthropy, but with commentary on the royal family itself. Over time, this creates a narrative in which personal experience and institutional critique overlap. Timing is another critical component. Harry and Meghan's projects have often coincided with moments of heightened public attention, whether due to anniversaries, political events, or royal milestones. Cookie Queens is no exception. By launching a high-profile documentary during a period of institutional transition, King Charles solidifying his reign, William preparing for the future, the Sussexes have ensured maximum visibility and impact. William reportedly interpreted this timing not as coincidence, but as part of a strategic pattern, one that reflects both opportunity and potential disruption. Another element of the pattern is the use of seemingly innocent themes to explore complex narratives. With Cookie Queens, the choice of Girl Scout cookies, wholesome, relatable, and universally understood, appears benign. But it carries subtle thematic resonance: growth, challenge, achievement, and pressure. Each project by the Sussexes has employed a similar strategy, embedding emotional and social commentary within content that appears outwardly harmless. For William, this pattern signals a repeated tactic: the use of media to influence perception while maintaining plausible deniability. The pattern extends to the blending of personal experience with public messaging. Harry and Meghan have consistently drawn on their own lives to frame narratives. Netflix specials, public appearances, and interviews all feature elements of personal storytelling intertwined with commentary on broader societal or institutional dynamics. This fusion amplifies impact. Audiences are not only entertained, they are invited to interpret, sympathize, and critique. For William, this repeated blending of personal and public messaging is particularly concerning. It shifts control from the monarchy to the Sussexes' curated narrative, undermining the institution's ability to manage perception. Furthermore, the pattern includes leveraging emotional resonance. The Sussexes' projects are designed to evoke empathy, sympathy, and connection. Even in a documentary ostensibly about cookies, there is the potential for emotional framing that mirrors their own experiences, pressure, expectation, and resilience in the face of scrutiny. William reportedly views this as a recurring tactic, one that subtly reinforces a particular worldview, that the institution can be oppressive and the couple's journey heroic. The emotional power of narrative is undeniable, and the pattern suggests an intentional or instinctive understanding of its influence. It is also notable how each project escalates in scope and visibility. Early initiatives were modest in reach. Later projects commanded global attention and media saturation. Netflix specials, high-profile interviews, and streaming projects have expanded influence far beyond traditional media channels. Cookie Queens, while appearing small-scale, fits within this trajectory of escalating reach. It signals that the Sussexes are not retreating from public engagement. They are refining and expanding it. For William, this escalation is part of the pattern he allegedly recognized: repeated, increasing, and potentially disruptive. Another facet of the pattern is audience engagement. Harry and Meghan have cultivated a public that follows, comments on, and amplifies their work. Social media, news outlets, and fan communities all respond, creating a feedback loop. Each project is amplified, discussed, and interpreted, often through the lens of previous controversies. William, reportedly aware of this, sees the pattern not just in content, but in the predictable trajectory of influence. Every project generates a response, reinforcing the narrative and perpetuating public discussion that may not align with the monarchy's preferred messaging. The pattern extends internally as well. Sources suggest that palace insiders have noticed a cycle of announcement, public reaction, and institutional concern. First comes the reveal, an interview, documentary, or announcement. Then follows media amplification, public debate, and audience interpretation. Finally, internal evaluation occurs, often resulting in quiet alarm or strategic response. Over the years, this cycle has repeated multiple times, and Cookie Queens appears to fit the same sequence. William, observing this cycle, reportedly recognizes that it is no longer sustainable. There is also a symbolic element to the pattern. Harry's projects frequently highlight tension between personal experience and institutional expectation, even when the content is outwardly neutral, like a documentary about cookies. The subtext can be interpreted as commentary on royal life, obligations, or pressures. For William, who has spent decades balancing public duty with private experience, the repetition of these themes across projects signals a deliberate or instinctive strategy. Each instance reinforces the perception of a narrative critical of, or at least distinct from, the traditional monarchy. Importantly, the pattern is not merely about media output. It is about control, autonomy, and influence. Harry and Meghan's ventures demonstrate their ability to shape narratives, define messaging, and reach audiences directly. For William, this raises both personal and institutional concerns. Personal, because he is Harry's brother and has a vested interest in family dynamics. Institutional, because the monarchy relies on controlled messaging, careful timing, and consistent framing to maintain credibility. Each project, especially with executive production involvement, challenges that balance. Another dimension of the pattern involves the reaction of allies, commentators, and audiences. Each project generates conversation, debate, and interpretation that extend far beyond the content itself. Media outlets analyze, speculate, and sometimes sensationalize, creating secondary narratives that amplify the original message. William reportedly sees this as a predictable yet potent aspect of the pattern. Harry and Meghan create content, audiences engage, and the monarchy must respond, often reactively. The cycle repeats, reinforcing influence while increasing internal tension. It is also worth noting the cumulative effect. One project may not be alarming. Several, occurring over a decade, form a discernible trajectory. Each initiative builds upon the last, creating a layered history of engagement that the monarchy must navigate. For William, Observing this long-term pattern reportedly fuels concern not only about the immediate project, but also about precedent, influence, and legacy. Cookie Queens is therefore evaluated not as an isolated endeavor, but as the next step in a well-established sequence of media activity. Finally, the pattern includes timing relative to family and institutional milestones. Projects frequently align with anniversaries, royal events, or periods of transition, maximizing visibility and potential impact. Cookie Queens, announced during a period of institutional consolidation, reportedly exemplifies this pattern. For William, the timing reinforces the sense that the Sussexes' media engagement is strategic, attentive to both public perception and institutional dynamics. The culmination of this pattern, according to insiders, is what allegedly triggered the strongest reaction. It is not a single documentary, phrase, or thematic choice. It is the repetition, the escalation, the combination of visibility, emotional resonance, and strategic timing. William reportedly recognized that Cookie Queens was not merely about cookies. It was the continuation of a recognizable trajectory, one that he believed could no longer be ignored. As this realization set in, discussions within the palace reportedly shifted. The focus moved from observation to consideration of potential responses. If the pattern continued unchecked, what precedent would it set? How would public perception, institutional credibility, and family dynamics be affected? For William, these questions were not abstract. They were urgent, tangible, and personal. The pattern was clear, and the next steps would be consequential. The announcement of Cookie Queens, while publicized as a light-hearted documentary about Girl Scout cookie season, reportedly triggered a storm of reactions behind the palace walls. The public saw smiling headlines, cheerful photos, and descriptions of a wholesome, coming-of-age story. The royal family, however, experienced something very different. Sources close to the palace describe a spectrum of responses, ranging from quiet disbelief to simmering frustration. Centered not on the subject matter itself, but on who was producing it, how, and with what potential implications. At first, the reaction was subtle. Palace staff, advisors, and close insiders reportedly exchanged incredulous looks. Cookies, one aide allegedly whispered. The question was rhetorical. Everyone understood the symbolic weight carried by Harry and Meghan's involvement. After years of media ventures, interviews, and public statements, even a documentary about a seemingly innocuous topic could be interpreted as a narrative move. It was a reminder that in the royal world, nothing is ever merely innocent or casual. Every initiative by the Sussexes is measured, parsed, and contextualized, both internally and externally. What reportedly set William apart from other observers was the depth of concern he perceived. While Charles, other family members, and advisors might have treated the project with measured caution, William is said to have recognized a recurring theme. Subtle media projects by Harry and Meghan had evolved into instruments of influence. Even when they appear benign, they carry undertones that could impact public perception of the monarchy. The reaction was reportedly not impulsive anger, but a considered, strategic alarm. William allegedly saw this as another juncture in a pattern. A pattern of media engagement that, if left unchecked, could influence both public opinion and family dynamics. According to insiders, the initial discussion of Cookie Queens within the palace was measured, even clinical. Advisors reportedly dissected the project, evaluating potential narratives, audience interpretations, and timing. Phrases such as pressure, achievement, and pain points were scrutinized carefully. Even in a context designed for children or family audiences, the language could be read metaphorically, paralleling experiences of royal life. This level of analysis, unusual for a project ostensibly about cookies, demonstrates how seriously palace members reportedly regarded Harry and Meghan's involvement. The reaction was not confined to emotional responses. Practical considerations quickly entered the discussion. Questions emerged. Could the project inadvertently reference royal life? Might audiences draw connections between the narrative and the Sussexes' own experiences? What precedent would it set if such a project were allowed to proceed without scrutiny? Sources indicate that these questions were central to conversations among William and senior advisors. Unlike media outlets, which often view such projects through the lens of entertainment, The palace evaluates them in terms of influence, reputation, and institutional integrity. Compounding concern was the fact that the Sussexes had maintained a consistent media strategy. Every project from Spare to Netflix documentaries had been layered, blending personal narrative with cultural commentary. William reportedly viewed Cookie Queens through this lens, seeing it as a continuation of a long-established approach. The concern was less about content and more about cumulative impact. By stepping into the role of executive producer, Harry was not just participating. He was shaping the narrative, controlling framing, and, potentially, guiding interpretation. From a palace perspective, that level of control by a former senior royal represented a challenge to institutional messaging. The emotional component cannot be underestimated. The relationship between William and Harry has been fraught since the Sussexes stepped back from royal duties. While the brothers once shared an unbreakable bond forged by childhood and loss, years of media attention, public conflict, and differing life choices have strained that connection. Each project by Harry and Meghan is therefore interpreted not only through an institutional lens, but also through the lens of personal history. According to insiders, William's concern stems in part from the realization that media projects can subtly influence family dynamics, shaping public perception of internal relationships, and potentially reinforcing narratives of conflict or estrangement. Beyond William, other senior palace members reportedly reacted with a mixture of disbelief and caution. Charles, historically measured in public response, is said to have taken a more restrained approach, preferring observation to immediate commentary. Advisors, accustomed to the delicate balance between transparency and discretion, reportedly prepared detailed analyses, assessing risks, messaging, and potential audience interpretations. For them, Cookie Queens was an outlier, both because of the Sussexes' involvement and because the project could, inadvertently or otherwise, touch on themes relating to the royal family. An additional layer of concern reportedly came from the timing of the project. With King Charles consolidating his reign and William preparing for future responsibilities, any media venture by Harry and Meghan carries disproportionate weight. The Sussexes' global visibility ensures that even subtle narratives will be amplified. Advisors reportedly discussed the potential impact on public perception, particularly how audiences might interpret parallels between the documentary's themes and the couple's personal history. In the palace's eyes, timing, reach, and influence converge to create a unique set of risks that must be carefully managed. What stands out in these discussions is the focus on intent versus perception. Even if Cookie Queens were intended as a harmless story about childhood and cookies, perception matters more than intention in this context. The public's interpretation of media by former royals is rarely neutral. Audiences draw connections, seek subtext, and interpret emotional cues, often unconsciously. This reality, sources indicate, was central to William's reported alarm. The project's potential to influence perception, intentionally or not, elevates it from a simple documentary to a matter of institutional significance. The reaction reportedly also involved intense discussions about narrative framing. Every detail, from dialogue to visual choices, was considered for its potential to convey underlying messages. Could moments of stress or challenge in the documentary be interpreted as reflections of Harry and Meghan's experiences with the monarchy? Could themes of resilience or independence be perceived as subtle critiques? The palace reportedly assessed these possibilities meticulously, recognizing that even without overt references, audiences may construct connections based on prior knowledge of the couple. Internally, the reaction was reportedly as much about control as it was about content. The monarchy relies on careful management of narrative and public perception. Projects like Cookie Queens challenge that control, particularly when produced by someone with insider credibility. William, in particular, allegedly viewed the situation as a tipping point. Repeated ventures by Harry and Meghan had created a situation in which influence, narrative, and interpretation were increasingly outside the monarchy's direct oversight. Another dimension was the emotional resonance of the perceived challenge. For William, the concern was not merely institutional. It was deeply personal. Watching a sibling engage in media ventures that could subtly shape public perception is emotionally fraught. It touches on loyalty, trust, and family history. Insiders report that William's approach was characterized by both strategic calculation and emotional consideration, an acknowledgement that media projects are never neutral, particularly when produced by a former senior royal. The public, of course, saw nothing of this internal deliberation. Headlines focused on the documentary's heartwarming premise, while social media celebrated a nostalgic, cheerful story about Girl Scout cookies. But inside the palace, conversations reportedly ranged from detailed analyses of narrative and audience perception to deeper reflections on what the project might symbolize about the ongoing relationship between the Sussexes and the institution. William, in particular, is said to have recognized that the project's significance extended far beyond entertainment. As advisors and family members weighed the implications, attention reportedly turned to potential consequences. Could a project like Cookie Queens, even unintentionally, influence public perception of the monarchy? Might it embolden similar future projects? Could it affect the internal dynamics of the family? According to sources, these questions were at the center of the palace's deliberations. William, observing the recurring pattern of media engagement, reportedly concluded that the situation demanded more than passive observation. There was also reportedly an element of strategic concern. The Sussexes' projects, while seemingly benign, carry global reach and influence. Social media amplifies messaging, audience interpretation is unpredictable, and public discussion can take on a life of its own. From the palace's perspective, Cookie Queens represents not just content but leverage, a vehicle that, intentionally or not, can shape narratives about personal experience, institutional pressure, and family dynamics. William's alarm, therefore, was not simply about the documentary's content, but about its potential as an instrument of influence. The reaction inside the palace, according to insiders, culminated in a sense of urgency. Cookie Queens was no longer just another media project. It was a focal point for reflection on patterns of engagement, influence, and narrative control. William reportedly recognized that repeated ventures by Harry and Meghan had created a situation where both family dynamics and institutional credibility were at risk. The project became a symbol, a trigger, and a point of decision all at once. In the aftermath of Cookie Queen's announcement, whispers about royal titles reportedly resurfaced in palace corridors. Titles are not just ceremonial. They represent responsibility, duty, and recognition of rank within the monarchy. For William and other senior royals, the discussion about Harry and Meghan's titles is never purely administrative. It is deeply symbolic, tied to perception, authority, and precedent. And according to insiders, the combination of media ventures, public statements, and high-profile projects like Cookie Queens reignited debates about whether the Sussexes should continue to hold certain privileges. The first question that reportedly arose was simple but loaded with consequence. Can Harry and Meghan maintain their current titles while engaging in projects that could be interpreted as critical or revealing of the royal family? Titles are historically tied to duty and service, and removing them is a rare and serious measure. The monarchy has always treated this as a last resort, preserving it for situations where personal action could materially affect institutional credibility or public trust. Cookie Queens, while seemingly innocuous, triggered analysis of whether this new project crossed an invisible line. William reportedly approached the issue with both strategic calculation and emotional weight. As heir to the throne, he is tasked with safeguarding the institution's reputation and future. Yet, he is also Harry's brother, with a shared past and a deeply personal connection. According to insiders, William viewed the combination of media ventures, repeated interviews, and high-profile projects as more than a pattern. They were a challenge to the traditional understanding of royal responsibility. Titles, in this context, were not just honorifics but instruments of influence. Historically, royal titles have been revoked in only the most extreme circumstances, such as breaches of law, abdication, or explicit disloyalty. For William, the question was whether repeated media engagement and perceived public critique constituted a comparable situation. Cookie Queens may be about cookies, but its executive producers are former senior royals, and the potential for public interpretation and symbolic messaging is significant. The mere perception that the project could indirectly comment on the monarchy reportedly heightened internal concern. Timing, again, played a critical role. The monarchy is in a period of transition. King Charles is consolidating his reign. William is preparing for his future responsibilities, and Harry and Meghan's high-profile media ventures maintain global visibility. In this context, even minor perceived infractions or symbolic gestures carry amplified weight. Discussions about titles, sources suggest, were not just about punishment. They were about signaling boundaries, expectations, and consequences in a highly visible and scrutinized family. The palace reportedly debated several possibilities. Could titles be suspended temporarily? Should restrictions be placed on the use of royal insignia in media projects? Would public clarification be necessary to prevent misinterpretation? Advisors emphasized both precedent and optics, warning that any action or inaction would be analyzed globally. William's alleged concern was that failing to act could set a precedent, emboldening further ventures that might blur the line between personal narrative and institutional critique. The discussion reportedly extended to public messaging. Even the act of maintaining or withdrawing titles sends signals, not only to the family but to the public. Titles are symbols of authority and legitimacy. Their alteration can influence perception of loyalty, responsibility, and propriety. In the case of Harry and Meghan, who had already stepped back from formal royal duties, the question was particularly sensitive. The palace needed to balance respect for their previous roles with the necessity of protecting the monarchy's credibility. Emotional considerations also influenced the debate. William, according to insiders, struggled with the tension between familial bonds and institutional responsibility. Titles are not just symbols. They are deeply personal markers of achievement and status. For a brother to consider the removal or modification of another brother's title is unprecedented in modern times. Yet the repeated pattern of media engagement and perceived challenges reportedly compelled William to weigh options seriously. Cookie Queens, though superficially innocent, reportedly became the latest catalyst in this ongoing dilemma. Adding complexity was Meghan's role. As a public figure with extensive media experience, her involvement amplifies scrutiny. Her influence ensures that projects reach global audiences, meaning that even subtle thematic choices can be widely interpreted. From a palace perspective, the combination of Harry's insider credibility and Meghan's media savvy creates a dynamic in which titles are not just honorifics. They become leverage, symbols, and points of potential contention. William's alleged concern was that without careful consideration, the monarchy's authority could be indirectly challenged or undermined. The discussion reportedly considered long-term implications as well. If Harry and Meghan continue to hold titles while pursuing high-profile media projects, what precedent does it set for future generations? Titles are inherited symbols of duty and responsibility. Allowing former senior royals to exploit their status for media ventures could fundamentally alter expectations. For William, tasked with both family stewardship and institutional guardianship, this was not merely theoretical. It was a tangible concern affecting strategy, perception, and the monarchy's future. Palace insiders also reportedly weighed potential public reaction. The British public and global audiences are highly invested in the monarchy's continuity and stability. Any action regarding titles, whether retention, modification, or removal, would be interpreted through multiple lenses: fairness, loyalty, family conflict, and institutional authority. The sensitivity of public perception further complicated William's decision-making, amplifying the stakes and urgency of the debate. Advisors reportedly emphasized precedent. Historical examples show that altering or revoking titles is rare, often reserved for actions that clearly breach law, duty, or loyalty. Cookie Queens, on its face, might not meet these criteria. But when combined with the broader pattern of media engagement, public scrutiny, and perceived critique of the institution, the cumulative effect reportedly triggered serious consideration. William, insiders suggest, allegedly saw the documentary not as a singular event, but as part of a continuum justifying a re-evaluation of titles. Strategic options reportedly included conditional measures. Could titles remain intact, but with limitations on public use or media involvement? Could formal clarifications be issued to define boundaries? Would proactive communication mitigate risk while maintaining dignity? According to sources, William reportedly explored every avenue, balancing personal loyalty, institutional integrity, and public messaging. The challenge was immense. Action could strain family relations, but inaction could undermine authority. Ultimately, the title's debate reportedly crystallized into a central question: how to respond to repeated media engagement without eroding the monarchy's credibility or alienating family members. Cookie Queens became the lightning rod, drawing attention to what William allegedly perceived as a larger, persistent issue. It was the moment when personal, familial, and institutional concerns converged, demanding a decision that could have far-reaching consequences. And as insiders suggest, what William allegedly decided next. How he signaled boundaries, communicated expectations, and potentially acted regarding Harry and Meghan's titles would escalate tensions to a level few anticipated. It was a turning point that combined emotion, strategy, and legacy in a way that could reshape relationships and influence public perception for years to come. On the surface, Cookie Queens is charming, relatable, and utterly innocent. A documentary about the excitement, challenge, and tradition of Girl Scout cookie season. But for palace insiders, the question lingered. Was it really just about cookies? Or was this, yet again, part of a carefully crafted media strategy designed to convey subtle messages about the Sussexes' experiences, frustrations, and perceptions of the royal family? To understand the magnitude of the concern, we need to delve into the mechanics of modern media influence and how Harry and Meghan have repeatedly demonstrated an uncanny ability to merge entertainment with personal narrative. The first clue lies in the framing. Cookie Queens is described as a coming-of-age story, exploring the joys, pressures, and pain points of an American tradition. On the surface, it's a celebration of childhood achievement and community spirit. But for anyone familiar with Harry and Meghan's previous projects, the language raises eyebrows. Pressures and pain points are terms that resonate strongly with the narrative they have cultivated over years. The constant scrutiny, the challenges of royal life, and the struggle to assert independence.